I'm Cris Halsall. I'm a professor in environmental organic chemistry at Lancaster University, and my background is I'm a chemist, and I've been researching synthetic organic chemicals in the environment really for the last 30 years, and particularly a group of chemicals that we brand as persistent organic pollutants. And that can include a lot of pesticides, particularly old pesticides, things like DDT, but industrial chemicals as well. So in that grouping, there's the perfluorinated forever chemicals. And then more recently, I've moved into the environmental transport and exposure to microplastics as well, and how microplastics, how we form microplastics in the environment, and then how those particles disperse and migrate, particularly in the global environment, resulting in contamination in very remote places like the Arctic and the Antarctic. Moving on to plastics, there is quite a bit of work now that is starting to observe microplastics in the water column of the Arctic Ocean. Levels are very low, which is really good. So if you were to compare what we observe, say, in the North Atlantic or the Pacific, the numbers of particles per cubic meter of water might range into the low sub-1 to 5 or 6 particles per cubic meter of water. So that's very low. But there are some studies that have started to examine the ice pack. So that single season ice with its ice rafted snowpack. And their things are quite different. We actually see plastic particles, and this is everything from polyethylene, polypropylene, a lot of nylon or polyamide, which we suspect is generated within the Arctic from the fishing industry. The levels in sea ice are actually quite high. And we're not sure why that is the case. We do know that growing sea ice will trap particles as it grows into the water column. And we also get atmospheric deposition onto the surface of that ice throughout the winter period. But we're not sure why the particle numbers in sea ice, particularly quite remote sea ice, can be more on the order of thousands of particles per litre of meltwater or even cubic metre of meltwater. And we think there's an enrichment process going on there where particles get entrained into the ice, and then those particles will follow the brine. And as that brine becomes more and more concentrated as it gets colder and colder in the winter, then those particles can become more concentrated in little pockets within the ice. And again, you have the same scenario that during the spring, as you start to increase temperatures, you get more brine movement in the ice, the system becomes more porous, then you're going to start to see those particles being removed or rejected from the ice. And that's, again, just at the time of the year when your beneath ice organisms are going to get hit with all these microplastics and particles. And that's an ongoing project. So we've got a number of PhD students here who are looking at that process, who have been taking samples, water samples in the Beaufort Sea, which is on the Canadian side of the Arctic, and importantly, also looking at uptake into the lower marine food web. So taking examples of zooplankton and then screening those. So zooplankton that are being collected in quite deep water, and then surface waters, and then even those ice-associated organisms, and trying to see which group has got the highest particles in and what type, and whether we can relate those particles to what's actually present in the ice. So there are a number of working groups who are looking at aspects of pollution in the Arctic, and including a sort of plastics expert group as well. And one of those organizations is the Arctic Monitoring Assessment Program, which is based in Norway, but draws on experts from around the world. And they do a lot of assessment work, looking at the latest science to give an indication of Arctic health and warning signs for problems, particularly when pollutants like plastics might be actually increasing, and then trying to come out with science-based strategies to inform the Arctic Council for what should be a pan-Arctic legislation or controls to try and reduce that problem. So that's where we're up to.
Oh, that sounds amazing, Crispin. It's so interesting. So Crispin is one of the speakers of the panel titled Ocean and Plastics, and that will feature during Opening the Bean 3 conference in Lancaster this June. So Crispin, just to conclude this amazing interview, do you have any sort of message to give to researchers who research waste and plastics and microplastics and comes from your same background?
Yeah, sure. I would. I think my message would be try and think global. So much of the really good science and the work that's going on in pervasive problems like plastics is obviously in the source regions. So here in the UK, but across Europe and certainly across Asia and North America. But think about the issue in that ultimately that plastic that you're dealing with could well end up in global circulation systems and then end up in very remote places. So I think my message is think global when you're tackling an issue. Of course, many of the issues that we're trying to unravel and understand people's behavior. Why is plastic discarded? Why isn't more plastic recycled? Why do we keep using virgin plastics? These are really thorny problems that are going to take a lot of effort to resolve. But all the time, just think about, right, there's some very remote parts of the planet that will benefit from the work that you're doing. So I think that's my message.
That's a very timely message, definitely a good point. So Crispin, thank you very much, and we really look forward to our panel together. Thank you.